I decided to surprise my wife at her office one Thursday afternoon. Lauren had been buried in work again. Those endless 12 to 14-hour days as CEO of Orion Solutions, and I thought it might be nice to bring her lunch and see her for once. But as soon as I pulled up to the building, a polished brass sign at the entrance caught my eye. Authorized personnel only. I laughed to myself, thinking the security guard would recognize me immediately. After all, I had been married to Lauren for 25 years. I approached the desk, holding the takeout carefully, and told the guard, "I'm the CEO's husband. She's expecting me." The young man looked up from his screen, smiled awkwardly, and said, "Sir, I see her husband every day. In fact, she's just coming out now." My stomach sank for a second. I forced a smile and said nothing, playing along as if I hadn't heard him correctly, watching her stride out in her tailored suit, her hair perfectly in place. I felt a swell of pride, but also a strange knot of unease. Lauren looked at me, and for a moment, I swore I saw hesitation flash across her face. The kind of hesitation I hadn't seen in decades. I handed her the lunch quietly, trying to ignore the guard's knowing glance, and said, "Thought you might like a break." She thanked me softly, almost too softly, and walked back into the building. That's when the chill ran down my spine. I realized that this simple, harmless surprise might be about to unravel everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I stood there for a moment, watching Lauren disappear into the office, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in my chest. Something about the way she glanced at me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't surprise. It was distant. I couldn't put my finger on it. But my gut told me this was different from the usual long hours in work. Stress. I decided to follow her inside, convincing the guard I had an appointment. He hesitated, then waved me through with a polite nod, his eyes betraying amusement I couldn't understand. The moment I stepped into the sleek, glass-lined lobby, the smell of coffee and polished wood filled my senses, and I caught snippets of staff talking in hushed tones. Everyone seemed to know something I didn't, glancing at me and smiling politely, but with an edge I couldn't ignore. Upstairs, Lauren was in a conference room with her executive team. I hovered near the doorway, pretending to check messages on my phone. I could hear fragments of her voice, words like "deal finalized," and "we move forward." But then she said something that froze me. "I'll handle it myself." I don't want anyone involved. I couldn't tell if she was talking about work or something else entirely, and the tight knot in my stomach grew. I wanted to call her out, ask what was going on, but something held me back. I felt like an outsider in my own life, a husband walking through a world that had moved on without me. That's when I noticed the young assistant passing by, giving me a quick, knowing look and a barely perceptible nod. My mind raced. What did they know that I didn't? Why did everyone here seem to be in on a secret I hadn't even guessed existed? By the time I left the office, my hands were shaking slightly. Lauren hadn't noticed me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my surprise had opened a door I wasn't ready to step through. That Thursday afternoon, I realized my marriage wasn't just under strain from long workdays. It was standing on the edge of something I couldn't yet name. Before I continue, tell, from which place are you watching this story right now? Please subscribe and like the video for motivation. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the dinner I had prepared, untouched. Lauren still hadn't come home, and the hum of the refrigerator felt louder than usual, almost accusatory. My mind replayed every moment from the office, the guard's smirk, the staff's knowing glances, and that fleeting hesitation on Lauren's face. Nothing added up. I'd married this woman, shared a life with her for 25 years, and yet suddenly, it felt as though I were seeing her through someone else's eyes. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Lauren. "Late night. Don't wait up. Love you. Love me." The words rang hollow, almost rehearsed. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. Something was off, and I had a sinking feeling that the little surprise I had planned had triggered something I wasn't ready to confront. The next day, curiosity gnawed at me. I found myself driving past her office, pretending to be on a random errand. I noticed her car parked unusually far from the entrance, near a side gate I hadn't seen before. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her laughing with someone in the parking lot, a man I didn't recognize, standing a little too close, sharing a moment that felt intimate in a way that made my stomach twist. I pulled back, pretending I hadn't seen anything, But my mind raced with questions I couldn't ignore. For the first time in decades, I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. Everything I thought I knew about Lauren, about us, was suddenly shrouded in doubt. That evening I couldn't sleep. I replayed every conversation, every glance, every detail from the past week, trying to find something, anything that would explain the unease that had taken root in my heart. The time Thursday came around again, I realized I needed to know the truth, even if it meant shattering the life I had always thought was secure. I didn't know it then, but that simple surprise visit had set in motion a chain of discoveries that would force me to confront secrets Lauren had kept hidden for years. By Friday morning, I could no longer ignore the gnawing unease that had taken over my every thought. Lauren's sudden distance, the way the staff seemed to avoid eye contact with me, the mysterious man I had glimpsed near the side gate, all of it pushed me toward a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to face. I found myself driving past her office again, under the guise of errands, lingering just long enough to watch the comings and goings without being noticed. And that's when I saw it. Lauren speaking intently with the same man from the parking lot, leaning close, laughing in a way that made my chest tighten, her hand brushing his in a fleeting, casual motion that seemed deliberate in its secrecy. I felt a surge of panic, my mind spinning with scenarios I didn't want to imagine. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was a new executive, maybe a client. Maybe there was some innocent explanation. But the pit in my stomach refused to lie. That night I decided I had to confront Lauren. Not angrily, not accusatorily, but cautiously, hoping to uncover what was happening without shattering the fragile trust we had built over decades. I waited until she was home, watching the clock tick past 10, and when she finally walked in, her face lit only by the hallway light, I noticed how exhausted she looked, how carefully she carried herself as if guarding a secret. I asked her gently about her day, about her meetings, and she answered in that calm, measured way she always did, but something was missing. The warmth I had grown accustomed to over 25 years felt muted, filtered and distant. I pressed further, casually mentioning the side gate, her laughter with the new executive, anything that might give me clarity. She paused, her eyes flicking away for a fraction of a second, and then smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That tiny hesitation, that imperceptible delay, told me everything I needed to know. Over the next few days, I found myself observing Lauren more closely, noting patterns, small inconsistencies, moments that didn't fit the story she was telling herself or me. Texts she left open on her phone, sudden work trips she hadn't mentioned, whispers with staff members who seemed careful around me. It all painted a picture I wasn't prepared to accept. I began documenting everything mentally, trying to piece together a puzzle that seemed both familiar and completely alien at the same time. I realized I was no longer just a husband or a bystander. I had become a detective in a life I thought I knew, driven by a mixture of fear, confusion, and a desperate need to understand the woman I had loved for so long. By the end of that week, I understood one undeniable truth. The simple surprise visit that had started as a sweet gesture had unearthed a hidden reality in our marriage, one that I could no longer ignore or dismiss. And yet, as I sat in the dim light of our living room, I knew that discovering the full truth would require confronting Lauren directly, and that confrontation, when it came, would change everything forever. The following week, I realized I could no longer remain passive, pretending that everything was normal while a quiet, gnawing unease settled into my chest. Every instinct in my body demanded answers, and yet I knew that rushing in blindly would only risk losing the fragile control I still had over the situation. I decided to become methodical, almost obsessive, in observing Lauren's life, tracking the rhythms, the little habits that once felt comforting but now seemed suspicious. I noticed the phone calls she took in corners of the office, her voice dropping just a notch lower, the way she laughed in a hushed, almost conspiratorial manner when she thought no one was watching. I began keeping mental notes, replaying conversations in my head, trying to detect patterns, searching for the tiny cracks in the armor of normalcy she had maintained for decades. One evening, as I rifled through a stack of papers she had left behind at the kitchen counter, innocent receipts, I thought, I found a dinner receipt tucked away in the folds of her purse. It was from an upscale restaurant in a part of town she rarely visited. My first thought was confusion. The second, a growing sense of betrayal. She had claimed to be working late at the office that night, yet here was proof that she had been somewhere entirely different. I sat there staring at that small slip of paper, as if it held the answer to a mystery I wasn't prepared to solve. My hands shook, not from anger alone, but from the sudden awareness that I had been blind to the life she was leading right alongside me, hidden in plain sight, driven by a mixture of fear and an obsessive need for clarity. I began retracing the steps from the first time I had seen that man near her office. I spent hours driving past her building, lingering in shadows, observing the comings and goings of staff, trying to catch any glimpse of interactions that might explain the unease, nodding my chest. And then one day I saw it again. Lauren emerged from the side gate, the man at her side, moving in a way that seemed casual but deliberate. They ducked into a small, secluded cafe I had never noticed before. From my vantage point across the street, I watched them speak in low voices, leaning close, their heads almost touching. The brief brush of her hand against his made my chest tighten painfully, a familiar motion but with a sharp, foreign undertone, intimacy masquerading as familiarity. They laughed softly, too softly, and I realized, with a sinking clarity, that this laughter wasn't meant for colleagues or friends. It was private, shared in a language I had never been taught. Returning home that night, the weight of what I had seen pressed down on me. I could barely eat. I could barely move. Sleep eluded me entirely. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the scene over and over, the casual closeness, the secretive smiles, the hand brush that spoke volumes without a word. I tried to rationalize, to convince myself that it was innocent, perhaps just a business connection, a confidant, but my gut refused to accept such easy explanations. For the first time, I felt powerless, stripped of the certainty I had always relied on in our marriage. The life I thought we shared, the routines, the understanding, the love, they all felt like a fragile facade hiding a reality I wasn't yet ready to face. Over the next several days, I became meticulous in my observations. I started noting every inconsistency, every deviation from the ordinary patterns I had once ignored. Text messages left open on her phone, sudden changes in meeting schedules, hushed conversations cut short when I entered the room. All these small details painted a picture I could no longer ignore. I realized that the person I had married, the woman I had trusted implicitly for 25 years, had layers of secrecy I had never imagined. A quiet, insidious fear began to take hold. Was this all new? Had it been happening for months, years, right under my nose? Or was it something that had only recently started? A slow erosion of the intimacy we once shared? By midweek, I had followed her discreetly yet again, lingering just out of sight, watching her navigate her day. Every handshake, every brief touch, every lingering glance now carried meaning I couldn't dismiss. It was consistent, deliberate, unmistakably intimate. I felt a gnawing panic at the edges of my mind. How could someone I had known so intimately, someone I had built a life with, be leading a double life right before my eyes? I felt as if the ground beneath me was giving way, and yet I couldn't turn back. By the end of the week, it became clear that the simple surprise visit, the one I had imagined as sweet, innocent, even romantic, had unearthed a storm I had no choice but to confront. Every instinct, every ounce of love and fear within me demanded that I uncover the full truth, no matter how devastating it might be. I knew that the life I had built, the marriage I had cherished, would never be the same once I faced the reality hidden behind Lauren's perfect composure. That week, in the dim light of our home, I understood a terrifying certainty. The person I thought I knew, the life I thought I shared, had shifted in ways I could no longer ignore, and the reckoning was imminent. The start of the following week, I had reached a point where every passing hour felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I couldn't eat properly, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts revolved entirely around Lauren, her actions, and the man I had glimpsed multiple times. Every detail I had observed, the casual brush of their hands, the secretive smiles, the whispered conversations I had overheard, played over and over in my mind, growing sharper, more vivid, until I felt like I was living in a parallel reality, one I wasn't supposed to see. I became hyper-aware of her every movement, her tone, even the way she held herself, and I began tracing her steps meticulously, as though I were mapping an invisible path she had carved out for a life I wasn't part of. Started leaving my own subtle marks of surveillance, parking a block away from her office, taking routes that allowed me to watch the side gate without being noticed, lingering in cafes and lobbies, pretending to be a passerby. Each observation confirmed what I had feared. There was a hidden layer to her life, one that existed entirely outside of our marriage. On Wednesday, I saw her again, exiting through the side gate and walking briskly toward the private cafe. This time, she didn't notice me at all, and the man she met there greeted her with a familiarity that made my stomach twist violently. They exchanged a long, hushed conversation, leaning close, their gestures intimate in a way that spoke of a bond I had never shared, a closeness that wasn't meant for my eyes. I felt my heart pounding, my chest tightening, and yet I couldn't look away. That night, the tension followed me home like a shadow. I tried to act normal, attempting small talk, preparing dinner, even laughing at a story she told about work, but inside I was unraveling. The image of her with that man haunted me, replaying endlessly, blending with my own memories of our life together, twisting them into something almost unrecognizable. I remembered the long nights we had shared, the quiet dinners, the laughter in the kitchen, and suddenly it all felt fragile, like a paper house waiting for a storm to tear it apart. The thought that she had been hiding parts of herself, or perhaps deliberately creating spaces where I was excluded, was unbearable. I realized I had been living alongside someone I didn't truly know, and the truth threatened to topple everything I had relied on for decades. By Thursday, I knew I had to act, but cautiously. I couldn't rush her into admitting anything. I needed to understand fully before I confronted her. I followed her again, noting her stops, the slight glances she gave over her shoulder, the quickening of her pace when she sensed movement behind her. I was becoming obsessed, yet I couldn't stop. My love for her, my need for answers, the fear of losing her entirely, it all fused into a tense determination I had never known in myself. That day I noticed another subtle shift. Her phone stayed close, almost like a shield, and she smiled at a message I couldn't see, that same private, intimate smile reserved for someone else. Returning home that evening, I couldn't contain the swirl of emotions inside me. Anger, betrayal, fear, and confusion collided, leaving me exhausted but unable to rest. I began cataloging everything in my mind, the receipts, the subtle interactions, the hushed conversations, the times she had disappeared without explanation, and slowly, a pattern emerged, undeniable and terrifying. I realized that the marriage I had trusted, the shared life I had believed in, was now a delicate illusion. I understood that the moment of confrontation was drawing near, that soon I would have to face her with everything I had observed, everything I had deduced, and demand the truth. By the end of that week, I was no longer simply a husband. I was a man on the edge, teetering between hope and despair, love and betrayal. I had watched, I had waited, and I had collected pieces of a hidden world, a secret life that Lauren had shielded from me for reasons I could only guess. The storm that had been quietly gathering since my first surprise visit was now raging at full force, and I knew there was no turning back. The confrontation I had dreaded was inevitable, and when it came, it would change everything, not just for our marriage, but for the life we had built together, for the trust that had been the foundation of our 25 years. That Friday evening, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The week of surveillance, the mounting evidence, the endless nights of replaying moments in my mind. It all led to this one, unavoidable confrontation. Lauren returned home later than usual, her steps quiet, her eyes tired but alert, as though she could sense the tension radiating from me. I had rehearsed the words 1,000 times in my mind, but now, standing in the dimly lit living room, I realized no rehearsal could prepare me for what was about to unfold. My hands were steady, but my heart pounded as if it were trying to escape my chest. I took a deep breath, forcing calm over the storm of emotions inside me, and said, "Lauren, I've seen enough. I know more than you think. I need you to be completely honest with me, right now." Her eyes widened, and for the first time in years I saw genuine fear there. She didn't speak immediately. She sank into the armchair, fingers clutching the edge of the cushion, and I could see her fighting some internal battle, weighing what to say, how much to reveal, how to protect herself. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, filled only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the wall clock. Then finally she met my gaze, her eyes glistening with a mixture of guilt, relief, and sorrow. "Evan, there are things I've hidden," she began, her voice trembling just slightly. Not because I don't love you, but because I was afraid. Afraid of losing what we have. I listened, every nerve on edge, as she revealed a story I had never imagined. The man I had seen wasn't simply a colleague or a casual acquaintance. He was someone Lauren had confided in during an incredibly stressful year, a friend she leaned on when the pressure of being CEO, managing crises, and carrying the weight of the company became unbearable. There had been moments of inappropriate closeness. Yes, but nothing physical, nothing beyond words and a shared burden. Her secrecy, she admitted, had been her attempt to protect me from worry, to shield our marriage from the chaos of her professional life. Each explanation, each confession, cut deeper than I expected, because it revealed the layers of isolation and fear she had carried alone, the same fears I had never recognized. In my drive to manage my own life, quietly alongside hers, I sank into the sofa, my mind reeling with relief, anger, confusion, and a deep, aching love all at once. The weeks of suspicion, of watching and following, of doubting every smile, every gesture, all rushed back in a wave. And yet, beneath the storm of emotions, I realized something profound. Even in her secrecy, Lauren had been thinking of our marriage, of us. The shock of the discovery had been excruciating, but it had also revealed the fragility of trust, the weight of unspoken fears, and the unacknowledged pressure we had both carried. We talked for hours that night. No accusations, no shouting, just the raw, honest conversation that had eluded us for decades. She explained the moments I had misread, the dinners, the meetings, the gestures of care and worry that had seemed distant but were rooted in concern, not betrayal. I shared my fear, my observations, my own moments of feeling left out of her life. For the first time in years, we saw each other truly, without the walls built over decades, without assumptions, without silence. And in that quiet, raw honesty, a fragile healing began to take place. By midnight, we were exhausted but unbroken. The house felt different, lighter, quieter, yet filled with a new understanding. The past weeks of fear, suspicion, and observation had brought us to the edge. But standing there together, we realized that even on the brink of collapse, the foundation of our marriage, our love, could still hold, if we were willing to rebuild it with transparency and courage. That Thursday afternoon, the simple surprise I had planned had indeed shattered everything I believed, but it had also forced a reckoning, a confrontation with truths we had both hidden from ourselves. And as I held her hand that night, I knew that we were no longer living in illusion, but facing reality together, a reality that was difficult, raw and real, but ours to rebuild.